But let's go ahead and jump in here, y'all. Today is part 2 of the stepping out of burnout and getting out of that chronic stress mode. Last week was session 1, where we talked about a basic framework for understanding how we got here. If you were in last week's session, just give me a yes in the chat. That way I just get a good idea of, how many of you were there last week versus how many we have new. Oh, lots of people. Love it. So today we're going to focus on part 2, which is all about how do you regulate your nervous system. We hear a lot about this online, different people saying, regulate your nervous system to get out of burnout mode. But exactly what does that mean? And especially the brain science behind it. I am all about the why. I am a why guy. And so we're going to talk from that framework today of how do you reverse fight or flight mode from a brain science perspective. So that is part 2. This is being recorded as well. So it'll be sent out tomorrow for anybody that registered. It'll be sent out to the same email that you registered with. So be sure to check your email tomorrow. Make sure to check spam too, just in case. I'm not sure. Hopefully it's not going into anybody's spam folders, but just in case. And then if for any reason, if you didn't get the last recording, I sent it out last Friday. So as long as you registered by last Friday, you should have received the recording if you weren't able to attend. But if not, you can always just shoot me an email. I'll put my email in the chat here. I think it's in your Zoom invite thing as well, but it's just peter@themillennialreset.com. So if you did not receive the last recording and you want access to it, shoot me over an email and I can always just send it over to you individually as well. Cool. So let's dive in. First of all, let's do kind of a quick review of where we left off last week. Okay, so first of all, remember that stress is simply a physiological response in our body. Okay, and that is triggered by our amygdala, that tiny little almond-shaped part of our reptilian emotional brain. And the amygdala's response specifically to any negative emotions like fear, anxiety, stress, and threat. And all of that is based on our past experiences and our subconscious beliefs. So any memories, any past experiences that we have that are associated to the feelings of fear, anxiety, stress, and threat, the amygdala is going to act fast. It is going to send messages to the autonomic nervous system, and it's going to put us into fight or flight based on our associated experience from those similar feelings. Okay. And this is all, again, based on our subconscious beliefs and our past experiences, right? But what's really important as we dive into not only today, but also the final 2 weeks, next week and then our 4th week, is understanding the difference between the subconscious and the conscious mind, because they operate on very different programs. The conscious brain is based on language, words, concepts, right? And this is a big reason, we're going to talk a little bit about this in like week 3 and 4, why a lot of people talk about like affirmations, do affirmations to create a better reality for yourself. But this is the reason why affirmations don't work for a lot of people, is because they don't understand the difference between how our conscious brain takes in information versus how our subconscious brain is programmed. So our subconscious, instead of operating on words and numbers and language and so on and so forth, it operates on patterns and predictions. Patterns of past thoughts and our associated emotions that create these really kind of condensed set of beliefs. So you can think about it as like metaphors, right? It operates on metaphors, images, and creates this kind of internal representation for us, as opposed to the conscious mind, which is live in action, words, numbers, logical brain, that kind of thing, right? And furthermore, it's estimated that about 90% of our reality, in other words, our thoughts and our internal representations of reality at any given moment, are driven by the subconscious mind. Your conscious thoughts that you're thinking right now and are aware, that you're currently aware of, only make up about 10% of our perceptions of reality, right? Now, we're going to get into that a little bit more down the road in week 3 and 4, but just kind of keep that in mind as we're going through today, because it only makes sense then, right? That if we're trying to create or to change a habit, it is much more effective and it's much more sustainable for us to do it at the subconscious level, because the subconscious is creating 90% of our reality, right? But the thing is that when the majority of our subconscious beliefs are sabotaging and limiting, then in order to change our mindset, in order to reprogram our brain and our mind, we need to also think about doing it at the subconscious level. So again, we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about that in week 3 and week 4. But the bottom line here is the whole idea is that the subconscious is the one that's controlling how most of our emotions get assigned meaning, especially those negative emotions like fear, anxiety, stress, so on and so forth, right? And so again, that's kind of what we're going to focus on a little bit today, more so in week 3 and 4, is how do we begin to not only reprogram our current situation, but also the subconscious mind, which is pretty much running the show for us 24/7. And the other thing to remember here is that our internal representations of reality are based on a feedback loop. And that feedback loop is based on any combination of our emotions, our hormones like cortisol and adrenaline and that type of thing, and our thoughts, right? And any one of those three can have an effect on the others in this infinite cyclical loop, right? But by default, our autonomic nervous system, the one that's responsible especially for chronic stress in our fight or flight mode, creates these automated stress responses by starting off with an emotion. We react emotionally based on an automatic synthesis and an association to our past subconscious memories, experience, and thoughts. And your brain makes a very, very quick prediction of the worst case scenario based on how we have been prone to perceive similar experiences in the past, right? And then those emotions then cause associated hormones to be released, kind of what we talked about last week with cortisol and adrenaline. And then when those hormones are released, they then fire off neural networks in our brain that are associated with those emotions. And then those thoughts then create more negative emotions. And again, you kind of get the picture, right? It triggers this endless cycle that's all driven by our subconscious reaction to an emotion like stress. So the cycle repeats itself. It just goes on kind of on a default program running in the background until there's either number one, a pattern interrupt, which we're going to talk about today, or the brain realizes the stress is gone. I can relax now. My parasympathetic nervous system, my rest and relax can kick back into gear and put me back into a state of homeostasis. But that's really hard for our brain to determine, like we talked about last week. It's hard for our brain to determine the end of an emotional event versus the end of a physical stressful event. So oftentimes that default mode just keeps going on in the back of our mind without us even realizing it. So if we want to change this feedback loop, then we have 3 choices. We can either change the emotion, or we can change the thought, or we can change the hormone. And when we change one, we change all 3, because all 3 of these are going to be interrelated to each other, and they all influence each other at the same time, which influences that internal feedback loop that's going on for us at any point in time. If you're with me so far, give me a yes in the comments. So thank you, Chelsea and Andrea. All right, good deal. So let's start off. If we're going to talk about changing one of these 3 things, let's start off with this whole idea of changing an emotion. I'm going to be very, very honest with you and very blunt. This is the most difficult one to change in the moment. Because again, your brain is designed to process, especially negative emotions, much more quickly than conscious thought. It all goes back to that role of our amygdala, right? It acts fast in response to fear, anxiety, stress, and threat. And so much of our reactions to those emotions being based on our subconscious beliefs and our mindsets, that takes time to change. Because again, if we're going to change our emotional reaction to things, then we need to change the filter, which is our subconscious mind. So this all goes back kind of to what we talked about last week, if you all remember, of the negativity bias. Our brains have a built-in negativity bias ever since the days of our ancestor hunters and gatherers. And the effects are largely subconscious. And one of the fascinating experiments that was done that kind of tells this story a little bit more in detail, I think it was back in the 1970s, there was this study done where they showed participants a series of images on a computer screen. And some of these images, old-fashioned computer screens, of course, some of these images were completely neutral, and some of them were designed to be emotionally triggering, right? And what happened is that these participants were all hooked up to all of these machines, these EKGs, and all of these machines to measure changes in heart rate, brain activity, so on and so forth. But here's what's fascinating is that the changes in physiology happened about a half a second before the picture actually, quote unquote, appeared on the screen. Well, how does that happen? Is it precognition? Is precognition a thing? Well, here's the thing is that your eyes aren't the thing doing the visual processing. Your eyes are not the thing doing the meaning making, right, themselves. The meaning making, the internal representation happens in your visual cortex, which is in the back of your head. And this all happens moments after stimulus enters our retina. But of course, what happens even before it gets a chance to reach our visual cortex is that those filters, and especially that amygdala, that emotional filter, even without the image being fully processed by the visual cortex to make meaning, if the brain predicts that that sensory information is associated to negative emotions, the emotional response happens before we even make conscious meaning of it. Pretty crazy stuff. So you can call it precognition, you can call it whatever you want, but the research that's been done for this, yeah, I see the reactions, a little bit mind-blowing, right? The research that's been done for this really comes down to basic brain science, is that it's not your eyes that are creating the picture, it's your visual cortex in the back of your mind that's reconstructing a picture. So by the time that that information, all that stimulus actually reaches your visual cortex, really all you're doing at that point in time is filling in the blanks, because most of the image has already been created for you by the filters known as your subconscious mind. So your internal representation is not actually reality. Your perception of reality is really just a distorted, edited, highly filtered version of reality that your brain is currently able to understand based on your subconscious filters. Whew. So we're going to get into this a lot more next week. So get ready for that, because that's where things get really mind-blowing. So again, emotions, that's why emotions are most difficult to be able to change in the moment, because much of our meaning making and our perceptions of reality have already even happened before we make conscious meaning of whatever the stimulus is around us. All right, so let's talk about thoughts then. Is it easier maybe to change our thoughts to change that feedback cycle? Well, when we experience negatively associated stimulus from our senses, emotions move quick. We already know that, right? And then those emotions eventually trigger additional related neural pathways, or in other words, thought patterns. But the reverse is also true. If we're able to interrupt, if we're able to find that tiny, tiny pause button, or start the pattern with a conscious thought, rather than allowing those negatively conditioned subconscious thoughts to run the show, well, then those conscious, empowering, positive thoughts have the ability to also create associated emotions, and therefore associated physical responses like hormones. And again, that's what we're going to dive into the final 2 weeks. So let's table that one for now. But yeah, the basic idea here is that most of us are in a default feedback loop of reacting, where our emotions are influencing our thoughts, as opposed to creating, where our thoughts are influencing our emotions. So then what about hormones? That's what we're going to talk about today. So the word hormone comes from the Greek word hormeo, meaning awakening. And the word emotion, we talked a little bit about this last week, comes from the Greek word emotere, which means energy in motion. So if we put these two together, then you can think about it like this. Energy in motion, or emotion, flows through you and becomes awakened through your hormones. Energy influences matter. How you process an emotion determines which hormones get produced and released, and those hormones then activate your gene expression. So another way to maybe think about that is that your hormones awaken your genes' ability to express themselves. And when your genes change, so do your cells. And when your cells change, so do your tissues, and eventually your entire mind and body. So the type of hormone that's released depends on the specific emotion being experienced and the physiological response needed to be able to basically deal with that emotion, if that makes sense. So that's what we're going to talk about big time today, is being able to hack that cycle, being able to change that feedback cycle by hacking our hormones. And so before we dive into that, let's just take kind of a quick example to illustrate this, looking at the difference between fear and happiness, right? So when we experience the emotion of fear, anxiety, stress, and threat, like we talked about before, that then activates those hormones like cortisol and adrenaline that runs in our body the program called survival mode or fight or flight or freeze mode, right? That's going to trigger the hormones to be released. Those hormones then produce physiological responses. Our heart rate increases, breathing quickens, our muscles tense up, and those physical responses reinforce the feeling of fear, making it stronger, more intense, and that influences our thoughts based on the neural pathways and connections that have formed based on all of our past experiences, right? So that's fear. Well, what about happiness then? When we experience happiness, the brain activates instead the reward system, because the biggest difference here is that when we experience emotions like joy, peace, happiness, whatever it may be, those positive emotions, the amygdala, the emotional processing part of our brain, those emotions still get processed by the amygdala. But instead of the amygdala sending a fast response to the rest of our body to react, to put us into fight or flight mode, the amygdala says, okay, we're good here, we're safe. And it allows the rest of that experience to then be processed by the higher order thinking brain. So remember we talked last week about how when we're in a constant state of stress and fight or flight mode, the emotional brain, the amygdala, is on high alert, and the thinking brain, the prefrontal cortex, is on low volume. When we experience these good emotions, the other directions happen, right? Where instead of having to worry about our body quickly responding to stress, it allows those emotions to pass through. And instead of reacting, it allows us to then be able to go into a higher order thinking mode. So what does this all mean? Here's a good way to think about it. Imagine riding a roller coaster, for example, right? You make your way to the top, and all of a sudden your breathing starts to become faster, your heart rate increases, and all of these different physiological responses are happening in your body. Guess what? Both of those energies in motion, or those emotions, could either be fear or excitement. The physiological response in the body is the exact same. How we label the emotion as either fear or excitement is dependent on our past experiences and whether or not our amygdala gets kicked off, or if the amygdala says, okay, this isn't triggering, so we're going to go ahead and allow this experience to be processed by the higher order thinking brain. So that's just one example of how two different people can have a very different response to this same exact experience, and how that feedback cycle then affects our thoughts, our emotions, and our hormones. So again, it's a little bit easier to be able to hack our hormones because our emotions are mainly in the form of energy and motion, but hormones are matter. They're in the form of particles, right? They're a bit more objective. And because we have tons of scientific research that there are certain default hardwired patterns in our brains as humans of what types of experiences tend to release certain hormones for most humans, then it would make sense that by putting ourselves into certain experiences that are commonly associated with a specific hormone or brain chemical, you can begin to hack your hormones. So today, my friends, is all about Hormone Hacking 101. And we have talked a lot last week about the stress hormones of cortisol and adrenaline. And don't get me wrong, these can also be beneficial, right? There is such a thing as good stress, like the roller coaster example, or standing in front of a room of people giving a speech. But in the context of burnout and chronic stress, these hormones that come from our adrenal glands are really what we need a break from. And this is where, for anybody that has maybe ever heard of like adrenal fatigue, yeah, Jessica, use stress. There is such a thing as good stress, right? Adrenal fatigue is thought to occur when our adrenal glands have been overworked to a degree that they can no longer secrete the levels of cortisol that are adequate for optimal function. And again, we're going to talk a little bit more about that later down the lines of regulating our hormones. But in the meantime, we're going to focus on creating more of a balance between the two systems, the fight or flight mode and cortisol and adrenaline versus reward mode, being able to approach those carrots and experiencing the release of hormones like serotonin, GABA, and dopamine. Cool. And I'm going to apologize you in advance because not only is my dog slurping water in the background, but I also have a leaf blower that's going at the most opportunistic time. So my apologies. Linda, oh my God, that's huge. Yeah, definitely. So we're just getting started. So we're going to talk about three main good hormones today. You've probably heard about these already. Feel free to put any questions that you have in the Q&A, or you can also put them in the chat. But starting off with serotonin. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter and a hormone in the brain and body, plays a key role in mood regulation. It is well known to promote feelings of happiness, relaxation, and well-being. Another hormone we're going to talk about is GABA. GABA stands for gamma aminobutyric acid. And GABA is actually an inhibitory neurotransmitter. Basically, all that means is that like dopamine is an excitatory neurotransmitter and hormone where it excites us, it makes us want to move towards a goal. GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter, which means that it calms down the firing of neurons in your brain associated with stress and anxiety. So it's not necessarily that it promotes good hormones, but it inhibits the chemicals in neurons associated with bad stress. So this may be a little bit inappropriate, but I'm going to say it anyways. I like to think about GABA as a cock block for stress. It's basically there to say, hey, brain, calm down a little bit with all of these firing neurons that are associated with stress and anxiety. And you may have heard too, there's lots of different supplements out there on the market that have GABA in them. But just FYI, it's really difficult for a supplement that we take in through our body to be able to cross the blood-brain barrier that exists. So the bottom line is, yeah, go ahead and like take GABA supplements if they work for you, but it's much more effective to talk about how to naturally regulate and promote GABA, because then you don't have to worry about the blood-brain barrier that is so difficult with some of those supplements that are out there. And Linda, I think that kind of gets to your question too. Is T-GABA like a mood stabilizer? Yes, it's a mood stabilizer in the sense that when your neurons firing so quickly all the time are the thing that's causing you a stress response, well, then by GABA inhibiting the firing of all of those neurons that are associated with stress and anxiety, then it gives you kind of a break from that like overload that's happening in your brain all the time, if that makes sense. So serotonin is one, GABA is one. And then the third one we're going to talk about today is dopamine. Again, we've all heard about dopamine, so I'm not going to go into this too much. Neurotransmitter hormone that's involved in motivation, reward, and pleasure. And when dopamine levels are balanced, they help us to stay motivated and focused, provide us with a sense of satisfaction, especially when we achieve our goals. But here's the thing. When we experience chronic stress or overwork, the levels of dopamine in our brains can become imbalanced. And chronic stress can then lead to a depletion of dopamine, making it really hard for us to feel motivated, focused, and satisfied. And there is such a thing as good and bad dopamine. So let's talk about that a little bit and the science behind it. Remember, we talked in the first week that our brain is much more likely and it's focused much more on avoiding dangers than approaching rewards. That's the negativity bias, right? And so our dopamine system is based on a comparison of expectation versus reality as we do approach the rewards in our lives, right? When we choose to put forth focus and attention towards something, our brain and our mind then measures whether or not the reality of the experience provided us the reward that we are expecting from it. And if so, then dopamine continues to get released and recycled in our brain, which causes that steady state of motivation and drive, right? That creates that sense of pleasure, reinforces the behavior, and it strengthens the neural pathways with that experience. So the next time you do it, you get the same reward, making it more likely that we'll seek out similar experiences in the future. So when we focus intentionally, and this gets to some of these questions already of doom scrolling, right? When we intentionally focus on something that aligns with our goals and our passions, we foster this good dopamine release. But when we experience chronic stress or overwork, the dopamine system can become dysregulated. And specifically, chronic stress can lead to a depletion of dopamine, which again puts us in that place of feeling literally stuck. It's like, I cannot literally fathom trying to complete this next task that I have on my to-do list because Well, I don't have any dopamine left, right? So good dopamine happens when the reward that we're expecting from an experience is aligned with the expectation of it. Bad dopamine, on the other hand, is when the reality of the reward does not align with our expectations, when the anticipated reward isn't as good as what we are expecting. And Andrea and Jessica, this gets to, I think, what you were talking about in the chat here too, is when we are doom scrolling on TikTok or social media. And what are we doing? Why are we doing that, right? Well, most of the time we're doing it because we're expecting a laugh or we're expecting inspiration. We have an expectation to be scrolling on social media. But when that inspiration or when that laugh never comes, dopamine doesn't get re-released and recycled. And so what happens? Well, then we crave something to replace the unmet expectation. So what do? We end up going on repeat mode. We keep trying to seek out the desired expected reward. Sometimes that looks like doom scrolling. Sometimes that looks like always going on vacations because we think that that's going to be the thing to make us feel better. But then when we get back home, we're like, shit, now I'm back into the same mode of like stress and anxiety. Well, why is that? Well, it's because, yes, we got that hit of dopamine in the moment and it felt great, but it wasn't sustainable. And when our brain recognizes that, then the dopamine doesn't go on repeat, right? So this is what's referred to as bad dopamine, and it can reinforce negative behaviors and thoughts, leading to the cycle of stress and burnout. Yeah, retail therapy. Perfect example. Hey, we all need to do what we need to do sometimes, right? So don't feel guilty about this. It's just the awareness of what's happening in your brain and body with it. So let's talk about basic hormone-based habits. A lot of this is, I'm coming at this from a sense of not necessarily what you can do, but more of why it works. Okay, so these habits are very simple. You've probably heard about a majority of them before, but we're going to dig into why. So exercise, very basic. But why do we exercise? Well, number one, it releases that built up tension from the repetitive cycle of cortisol and adrenaline that are built up in our body. Because remember, cortisol and adrenaline are there to help us fight stronger and run away faster from the tiger in the bushes. But when we encounter emotional stress, there's nothing to run away from. There's nothing to hide from. So that cortisol and adrenaline builds up in our brains and our body. So exercise allows a release for that. The next thing that's really fascinating about exercise is the reduction in amygdala activity. Again, that's the emotional part of our brain that triggers stress. And specifically, there was a study that was done back in 2020 by the journal Neuroimage that looked at the effects of a 12-week exercise intervention program on amygdala activity. So these participants were randomly assigned to either an exercise group or a control group, and they completed 3 45-minute exercise sessions per week for 12 weeks. And what they found after those 12 weeks is looking at images of the brain is that the exercise group showed significant reductions in amygdala activity compared to the control group. So proving, in other words, that regular exercise can indeed have long-term benefits for improving our emotional regulation. The other thing that goes without saying, obviously, is exercise really helps with the promotion and the release of dopamine. And not only does it promote the release of dopamine, but here's the really cool thing is that it increases the sensitivity of your dopamine receptors in the brain. So it makes the dopamine system even more efficient. Increase serotonin. And the other one is the increase in GABA levels. And somebody mentioned earlier that they did yoga. Yoga is an amazing exercise if you are wondering like, oh gosh, what exercise do I get started with? There was a study that was done that looked at yoga practitioners, and they found that after just a 60-minute session of yoga, these yoga practitioners had on average 27% in GABA production. And remember, GABA is that inhibitory neurotransmitter that helps with the calming down of all those firing neurons associated with stress and anxiety. So exercise, simple habit, but hopefully now you have a little bit more of the why behind it, of exactly what it's doing for your brain and body. Next up, spending time in nature. What does nature do for your brain and body, especially when you're burnout? Well, number one, nature provides a calming sensory environment. And so when we're in nature, there's fewer artificial stimulus, right? There's less traffic noise, there's less bright lights and screens in front of us. And that reduction in overstimulation that contributes to stress and high cortisol levels, that time in nature gives us a break from that decreased cortisol. The other thing that it does is provides us opportunities for natural light exposure, which I'll speak for myself. I know I don't get nearly enough natural light in my life. Anybody in New York or the East Coast right now that's being affected and you can't even see the sunset? Oh, it's crazy. My podcast guest, I'm going on a tangent, but my podcast guest today was, she lives in New York City, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's so crazy out there. Sierra, Adus, Basuda. My thoughts are with you for sure. Hopefully it clears up. Anyways, if you can get into natural light in nature, it has been shown to regulate the body's circadian system. And so our circadian rhythms are all about, when our bodies tell us that it's time for sleep or when it's time to wake up. And it also reduces our cortisol levels. And then again, dopamine, serotonin get released. Here's a really cool thing about being in nature, though, is an increase in activity in the DMN, or the default mode network in the brain. So the default mode network is a network of brain regions that is active when we're not focused on the outside world, but instead when we're focused on things like introspection and self-reflection and future planning, right? And when we're spending time in nature, it helps to promote that self-reflection, which can be obviously really beneficial for overcoming burnout and deciding like what's next in my life. So there was a study published back in the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences that found that just a 90-minute walk in nature decreased activity in the area of the brain associated with depression while increasing activity in the default mode network. There was another study in the Frontiers in Psychology that found that participants that spent 4 days out in nature camping had increased connectivity. In other words, the brain connections were different than before they went out in nature, the 4 days before that, right? So really fascinating that just in only 4 days, your brain can literally change its structure and neural connections by simply being out in nature. So that's one habit to also consider as well, is in addition to exercise, getting yourself out in nature. Meditation. We've all heard about this. Maybe we've done this before. If you've done meditation before, let me know in the chat what type of meditation you've done. Maybe you've done some sort of specialty meditation, or maybe you just sit there and watch your breathing. Really curious, because I'm going to talk a little bit more later, and we're going to actually do a guided meditation at the end of today as well. Sierra, guided. Okay, very cool. Use the Calm app. Yeah, Cindy, that's a good one. So similar to what we discussed with exercise, meditation can not only decrease activity in the amygdala, but the other thing is that it can really help individuals to become less reactive to the stressors of everyday life, which helps us to perceive them. Remember, we talked about perception and how our perception is our reality. Well, meditation allows us to perceive stimulus in a less threatening way. And the other thing that it does is that there's been studies that have shown an increased size in the hippocampus with meditation. And the hippocampus is the part of your brain that's all about memory. And so when we're in a chronic stress burnout mode, the hippocampus literally decreases in size, which makes it harder for us to remember things. A lot of people that suffer with burnout, they often mention, oh my gosh, I feel like I have so much brain fog going on. Well, that's why. It's not only because not only is your logical brain on low volume, but your hippocampus, when you're in a mode of chronic stress, your hippocampus actually shrinks. Meditation has also been shown to increase GABA production. And the last thing is that by calming that emotional brain, the analytical brain can then turn back on. And that's what allows us to make those more kind of like logical, higher order thinking decisions. One of the most well-known studies of this was conducted by a team of researchers at Massachusetts Gen Hospital in 2011. And they took 16 individuals that had never meditated before. And they went They went through an 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction program. And this included, daily meditation practice. And they used MRI imaging to measure participants' brain activity before and after the 8-week program. And those participants that underwent the training program had significantly less activity in the amygdala in response to emotional stimulus like stress and anxiety and so on and so forth, compared to the control group, of course. And they also reported, of course, the participants self-reported that their levels of stress and anxiety drastically decreased after the program. So there are several different techniques of meditation, but if you're looking to keep it simple, just focus on your breath. Somebody mentioned the Calm app. That's a really great one out there. There's other free apps to use with meditation, but I used to be the type of person that I was like, oh, meditation's not for me. Like my brain has too much going on. I can't even sit still for 2 minutes, let alone like a 30-minute meditation session. But when you know what it's doing for your brain and when you are aware of the benefits of it, then it becomes much more impactful. And you're motivated then to be able to actually practice it as opposed to giving up on it like I did at one point in time. Yeah, Cindy, exactly. Start with just 5 minutes and build up from there. Next one that we're going to talk about is hormone-based habits of hobbies and volunteering. So get this. One of the best ways to increase your dopamine levels, again, that's all about motivation and satisfaction, is to do something that gives you a sense of purpose. And participating in a hobby or something that you're really good at is a way to promote those purpose-centered feelings. So here's kind of the irony of it all. I know probably a lot of you are thinking this, is that you might say, well, I don't have time to do hobbies, or shit, I don't even have hobbies anymore, right? And so my advice for you there is just try things out, right? Try things out that feel good to you, that fill you with some sense of purpose. Because once you start a hobby, once you start taking part in it, then you start to feel the associated pleasure. And that then kickstarts our reward system, which subsequently kickstarts our motivation and our dopamine system to do it again. So again, start small here. Maybe it's just, 15 minutes once a week of participating in a hobby. And if you're not sure, again, of what hobbies you have, then another way to hack your dopamine release is through volunteering. Sierra, I love that. Volunteer at a cat shelter. Yeah, so volunteering, researchers call it the helper's high, because volunteering stimulates the release of dopamine because it provides that sense of purpose and fulfillment. By, spending time in service of others, you really begin to increase your sense of meaning and appreciation, which in turn increases your dopamine release. So again, you might say to yourself, well, gosh, I don't have time to volunteer, or shit, I'm just like too stressed out to go volunteer. And that's totally fine. Give yourself grace by all means. But the irony of it is that by making time for things like hobbies and volunteering, you also then make it easier for yourself to accomplish the things on your to-do list, because you're now hacking your dopamine system as well. Lauren says, I exercise and then stop exercising and gain it all back. Then we do it over again. Yeah. And the thing is, right, like do what works for you. If exercise just like stresses you out, then pick a different habit for your mental well-being, right? It doesn't have to be exercise by any means. Do what feels right and give yourself grace for sure. All right. And the last one that we're going to talk about here, this one you might have heard of, you may have not have heard of. You can let me know in the chat if you've heard of this before. But microtasking or micro goals. I use this daily. I mean, you can see right here, I have Post-it notes galore. And so the way that microtasking works is that we know from neuroscience research that dopamine is released not only when we achieve a goal, but also when we put forth effort towards a goal, or again, something that gives us purpose. But I'm sure some of you might be able to resonate with this, but like when you're in burnout mode, when you are stressed the fuck out, sometimes goals can just seem like the loftiest things ever. You're like, there's no way that I can accomplish that goal today, right? And so the idea is that instead of these goals being such a heavy lift and such a huge lift on us when we're in burnout mode, making it difficult to, accomplish things on our to-do list, begin to take the time to break down your goals into micro tasks, mini milestones. And what this does is these micro tasks or these micro goals provide a sense of accomplishment and progress. Even when completing a full task seems overwhelming, by breaking down those larger tasks into smaller, more manageable tasks, what happens is that when you not only achieve that goal, but even as you put forth effort towards it, dopamine is getting released in your brain. And so by just focusing on just one tiny task at a time, not only are you avoiding that feeling of feeling, completely overwhelmed, but you're also hacking your dopamine release. So again, like I take my Post-it notes and I write down like all the things that I need to get done for a specific task that week. And then anytime that I get something done, I take that Post-it note and I celebrate the fuck out of it. Because when you celebrate, you're also then increasing and promoting that dopamine release. So microtasking, chunk it down, tiniest little tasks. I'm talking like if you need to like clean your house or let's just say clean your kitchen, right? The first task is getting out the cleaning materials. The second task is load the dishwasher. Or if that seems too overwhelming, load the silverware. Break it down. Break it the fuck down so that you can hack that dopamine release, okay, and avoid the overwhelm program. So at the beginning of each week, this is what I really love to be able to do is on Sundays, instead of like getting the Sunday scaries, is that I identify everything that I want to get done for that week. And then I block out my calendar Monday through Thursday. Now, I have a part-time job that I work for somebody else, but most of my tasks are like my own business, right? So I block my calendar out Monday through Thursday to accomplish the entirety. My plan is to accomplish the entirety of those tasks, right? And then Friday becomes a catch-up day for me. And so I give my brain a plan that it can anticipate so that it doesn't have to keep being reminded of what do I have to do? What do I have to do? Because what I used to do is I used to wake up on Monday morning and my brain would go into automatic overdrive burnout mode. Because what I now realized is that what my brain was doing is it was trying to remind me of all of the thousands of things that I wanted to get done the week before that I had planned on doing. And so the moment that you wake up, your brain is like, okay, what do we got to do today to survive? But when you give yourself that time on like a Sunday afternoon or a Sunday evening to really just like intentionally plan things out in microtasking, then your brain anticipates and it already knows when you wake up today, it already knows exactly what you need to get done. And then again, if you don't get it all done by Friday, at least you've given yourself kind of that catch-up day. And if you do get it done, then Friday is your day to celebrate. So again, it's all about giving your brain the plan that it can anticipate. Yes, Chelsea, Sunday scaries are so real. I think I'm going to start doing more like TikTok lives on like Sunday scaries, being a little like Millennial Reset Sunday scaries TikTok lives. So as you see here, these habits are nothing fancy, right? These habits are things that you can do starting tomorrow. But the thing is that habits become so much more impactful when you know why you're doing it, when you know the brain science of what it's doing for your brain, mind, and body. So the idea here is to train your brain to recognize good hormones like dopamine and serotonin and GABA as important. When we train our brain to say, I want to experience more of this specific hormone, then your brain realizes, oh yeah, that's important to you. And then the subconscious eventually over time, this doesn't happen overnight, right? Over time, the subconscious then says, oh yeah, what's really important to this person is feeling emotions of motivation, of happiness, of satisfaction. So you begin to form a new filter. We'll talk more about that next week as well. But that's the basic idea with this, is being able to train your brain to recognize hormones as good. So y'all, it is now your turn. In the next week, I want you to really, you don't have to do this, but try to pick maybe just like 1 to 2 habits that you're going to start small with. Pick the habits that work for you. And as you're doing these habits, remind yourself of the why. Become really aware of like what effect it's having on your mind and body so that you build up that motivation to really keep up with those habits. Because like we talked about last week, it takes about roughly 30 days to be able to form a new habit 60 days is when that habit becomes a little bit more automated. And 90 days and beyond is when that habit then becomes subconscious and even unconscious, where it runs as kind of a default program for you. So let me know in the chat which one of these habits, if you're already doing one, you can continue with it, or maybe if you're ready to pick up a new habit now that you have a little bit more why behind the what. What's maybe the one habit that you are going to pick up? Jessica says exercise. Painting is a hobby. Love it. Exposure to nature. Meditate way more. Yeah. Ooh, transcendental meditation. Love that. Yeah, and start small. Yeah, if it's something new to you, just start small and give yourself that grace. So I know I'm kind of coming up on time here, but we're going to spend the last few minutes here. If you're interested in sticking around, we're going to spend the last few minutes I'll walk you through a guided meditation if you have the time and if you are interested. But for now, it's giveaway time. So last week I gave away, where did it go? Here we go. The annual planner from last week. And this week, I am giving away a free membership for an entire year to the Millennial Reset membership program. So the Millennial Reset, I'll send this out as part of the follow-up as well. But if you're interested in becoming a member, it is $14.97 a month, but for the first 200 people, you're going to get 33% off. So that is $9.97 a month. And I'm just actually going to, instead of talking about it, because somebody's going to win this, I'm going to switch over here and, oops, I'm just switching my screen share because I'm actually going to go into the website and give you just a quick little preview of what to expect. Okay, so when you become a member, which you can, I'll send out the link afterwards for those of you that are ready for this. Oh, Jennifer, you ordered the planner. I love that. Let me know when you get it, how you like it. Super excited to hear your feedback. When you become a member, you have two options. You can either do the month by month, or you can do an entire year. And again, the first 200 people are going to get 33% off, so it'll be even less than this. And you get a 14-day free trial. When you become a member, then you get access to all of this good stuff. So members only VIP events. So coming up in July, we have our monthly group coaching call for members only that is all about motivation hacking, the brain science of how to hack your motivation. And then you also have access to the ongoing monthly series, similar to the ones that we're doing right now. The next one that's coming up that I'm super excited about in July is the Go Unstuck Yourself 21-day challenge, which is all about the no BS brain science and even quantum physics of mindset and manifestation. So you get all access to the VIP member events. You're also going to get all access to all of the recordings of past events, as well as video podcast episodes. And you're going to get full access to all of my mindset courses. So similar to what we talked about today, I have an entire course on regulate and recover for being able to regulate your nervous system. And I also have the reprogram your mindset. If those of you that are interested in jumping ship and starting your own business, there's the creating your own profitable passion online course. All of that comes free. Instead of having to pay, $70 one time for the course, you get all that included with your annual membership. And not done yet. We have our own chat within the group. So this is our space for Q&A. Anytime that you have questions about, hey, what is this all about with my brain and body with stress and burnout? You can ask them in the group chat. That's where you can also learn about other upcoming events. And there's a loyalty program as well, where you can get discounts to buy things within the store, the Millennial Gear store. So you can buy things like this. I've got this one here that I drink my wine out of, got millennial anxiety. So lots of benefits to the subscription. And again, I will send that out. You'll have additional chances to sign up for weeks 3 and 4 as well. But if you're ready to take advantage of that 33% off for the first 200 people, you can get in there now. And what I'll do for y'all, if you are interested, is I'm going to put the link for the plans, the membership plans in the chat. So that way, if you want to do it right now, by all means, you can do that. But our giveaway for today is going to be for a free month-long membership. And here's how it's going to work. There's going to be a little trivia question that I'll ask you in a second. And the first person to get it is going to get the free membership. Let me get my pen and paper here ready so I can write down the person's name. And then obviously, whoever it is, I'll send you an email to whatever email you have that you registered with the discount code for the 100% off. Okay. And you'll get that for the full year. So the trivia question is, and whoever gets it right in the chat first is going to be our winner. When we talk about time in nature, there is a region of our brain that lights up when we're in self-reflection mode. What's it called? What's the full name of it? The full name of it. What does it stand for? Andrea DeWeese, you are the first one. The default mode network. So, Andrea, congratulations. You, my friend, get a full year access with all of those benefits to the Millennial Reset membership, group coaching, and support. Yeah, you can type fast. The benefits of being stressed where you can type fast, right? So congratulations. But for everybody else, of course, you can get on in there and take advantage of that 33% off to become a member. All right, last thing, y'all, let me get back into my deck here. Just a heads up that again, next week, part 3 is where the really good stuff comes into play. So get ready. If your mind has been blown already, get ready because it's going to get ultra blown next week when we get into that whole idea of understanding the roots of a default mindset. And then part 4 of what does it take to be able to truly and consciously reprogram your brain for less stress. So last but not least, y'all, you do not have to stick around for this, but if you are interested, we're going to go through a little guided grounding meditation here together to end things out for the evening. So if you are interested, please stick around. If not, of course, you are welcome to jump off. And I will send that out. Andrea, I love that. Thebomb.com. We need to bring that back. So thank you all so much for joining. This will kind of be after this. You can kind of drop off as you desire. But we'll do kind of a quick little guided meditation to end our time here together. But thank you all so much for joining. And if you are sticking around for the meditation, go ahead and just begin by finding a place. If you want to lay down, you can do that. Just begin by finding a really comfortable position for yourself, whether you're seated or lying down, and begin to just take some deep breaths, breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth. And just begin to relax your body. And as you continue that deep breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth, allow your eyes to close. Take a moment now to really connect with your body. Feel the weight of your body against whatever surface you're resting on. Notice any tension or discomfort. And allow them to soften and release with each breath. And now just bring your attention to your breath. Feel the natural rhythm as it flows in and out. Notice the coolness the air as you breathe in through your nose, and the warmth as you exhale. Follow the sensation of your breath as it moves in and out of your body, anchoring you to this present moment. As you continue to breathe, imagine roots like a tree extending from the soles of your feet. Reaching deep into the earth. Visualize these roots growing stronger, deeper, connecting you to the stable and nurturing energy of the earth. Feel the support and grounding that comes from this connection. Take a moment, notice the sounds around you. Listen to the gentle hum of your surroundings. Whether it's the distant sounds of nature or the subtle sounds within your own space. Just allow these sounds to wash over you without judgment or attachment, simply observing. Bring your attention to your body once again. Starting from the top of your head, slowly scan down through your body, paying attention to any areas of tension or discomfort. As you come across these areas, consciously release the tension, allowing your muscles to relax and your body to soften. Now, bring your awareness to your heart center, space in the middle of your chest. Visualize a warm, radiant light glowing within your chest. Feel this light expanding with each breath, filling your chest and radiating outwards, enveloping your entire body. Allow this light to bring a sense of peace, love, and compassion into your being. As you bask in this loving, warm energy, imagine a golden thread that extends from the top of your head, reaching up towards the sky, connecting you to the vastness of the universe. Feel yourself being supported by this cosmic energy as you tap into the infinite wisdom and guidance that surrounds you. Take a moment to silently ask for any guidance or insights that you may need in this moment. Trust that the answers will come in their own time and in the most appropriate way for you. Now slowly bringing your awareness back to your breath. Feel the gentle rise and fall of your chest as you inhale and exhale. With each breath, bring yourself back to the present moment and carry with you that sense of peace, relaxation, and connection. And whenever you're ready, gently open your eyes. Take a moment to reorient yourself to your surroundings. And carry this sense of grounding and connection with you through the rest of your day and night. Thank you all so much for joining. Hope to see you all next Thursday, same time for part 3. Much love. Thank you.